welcome to Lorena's Labyrinth today. I'm Anah Parreli, and of course I've got the channel Lorena's Labyrinth, and today I'm going to be talking about the angel of nature, who I refer to as Ariel. Obviously I got the name Ariel from my own deck of cards, and it's something that I relate to. Now, I recognise in the first instance that many people will have different names for different angels. So just because I call the angel of nature Ariel doesn't mean that you have to. It's actually the intention. I like to have names for the angels. It feels more personal than me just doing a random, if I'm trying to work with nature, so shall we say, or the energy of nature, rather than turning around and saying, I invoke the angel of natures to X, Y, and Z. I feel that it resonates more with me and it becomes more personal when I give the angel a name, hence the fact that I use the names. But if you don't want to use the name Ariel, that's fine. The other thing to point out, of course, is that when we talk about angels, we're talking about light beings, we're talking about energy bodies, but they're very high vibration, certainly when compared to us that are in our earthly bodies. And so therefore, when they do manifest, they don't necessarily manifest as these winged beings that I've got in the images. I like to portray them with the bird wings because it actually feels nice to me. So I'm just outlining here that don't expect to actually, if your clairvoyant gifts open up, that you're going to be seeing angels in this form. They present and manifest to us in ways that we're comfortable with. And realistically speaking, where a human aura is this egg-shaped aura, shall we say, the angelic auras tend to be more, if I can pronounce the word, cylindrical, and they tend to have a little bit of a wing at the top. So probably, I'm not going to get too descriptive, but the bottom line is, if your clairvoyant gifts open up, unless you state your intention or desire for them to manifest with the feathered wings, then they're going to present as light bodies to you. And anyway, I just find it easier to have them present as with the wings. So just to reiterate, we're going to talk about Ariel. I call her Ariel, angel of nature. Hopefully it's not going to be too long a video, but there's a lot involved with the angel of natures, and you'll see why as we get through it. So the first thing that we need to understand about Ariel, I guess, if we want to apply rationale, and just a reminder, some people will say that you can't apply logic and rational processes to anything that is divine, shall we say, but I think I tend to disagree, actually. I believe it's a lot more logical than we as humans would give it credit. But anyway, the first thing to understand is that she is one of the cherubim angels, or cherubim, however you pronounce it. She's a very powerful nature angel because at the end of the day, let's be real, nature is one of the great cosmic forces that we have. She's associated with the kingdoms of air, and she's in charge with the human interaction between devas and angels. The other thing too is that if we talk about the goal of creation that she has, or her purpose, she is responsible for strengthening the interactions that we have as humans with the angelic devas, if you like, or the nature spirits. And we'll go into it further as we get through this video, but the most important task that she helps us with is the process of assisting us to discover our own true nature. Because what happens is we tend to be born, as you know, and as we mature and grow and experience life, we tend to forget the truth of who we are. We might adopt behaviours that aren't aligned with our core essence, shall we say, and we can perhaps become angry people or sad people or whatever. And none of these traits are actually true to who we are. So anyway, that is the primary focus really for her, or the primary goal. But she also has all of these other areas of expertise, shall we say. If we were to apply the rationale to the human form, she's kind of like, if the creator, if we put the creator God as the CEO, there are obviously your upper management execs, and then you might have your departmental heads. So we would say that Ariel's right up there as one of the powerful. She controls a lot of stuff. So anyway, the best places that I find to connect with the Creator and the angels is actually outside in nature. What else can I say? I would encourage people to do it, but obviously weather's going to play a big part in just how we enjoy nature. I mean, if you live in a freezing cold place, you're going to try and enjoy it from, I guess, a nice little, what do they call them, glassed-in rooms, conservatory or something like that. In the heat, where I tend to spend most of my life, it's under the cover of shade so that we don't get too much exposure to the UV rays, stuff like that. Okay, so Ariel provides an abundance of information and so many opportunities for us to rejoice at life and to manifest love in our life, love for the Creator and love of all life. And just the reminder before we crack on to the next slide is the primary goal is to assist in the discovery of our own true nature and to live it and to walk it and talk it. So, as I said before, Ariel is a cherubim. Now, when we talk about angels, they're also genderless. Okay, they masculine, feminine, male, female. They're two different birds, shall we say. If we're talking about somebody being male or female, then we're talking about biological, and that's a physiological state, okay? And that's for the purposes of procreation, obviously making babies. When we talk about masculine and feminine, we're talking about energy. So from the specific fact that angels actually don't have physical bodies, they're neither male nor female, and this is why we say that they're genderless. However, there is a distinction here. While all the other angels can manifest as male or female for people, so if I was trying to invoke a specific angel for a specific purpose, as we go through the videos that I give to you, most of them, even Archangel Samuel, I'm aware that some people see Archangel Samuel when they've got the psychic gifts, of course, being fully functional or whatever. They might see Archangel Samuel manifest as a female. For me, I see Samuel manifest in male form. So they can swap to accommodate the comfort of the person because, of course, divine energy is unlimited. However, when it comes to the angels of the seraphim and cherubim orders, which, of course, this is what Ariel is, they do present pretty well with the solid. You can... I'm just trying to think how to actually explain this. Okay, because Ariel is a cherubim, she's never going to present as a male. She's always going to present as a female, and that goes for all cherubim. And when it comes to the seraphim, they will always present as a male. There's no movement and shifting around here. This is just how they manifest. What else can I say here? So they've got specific tasks. They also are associated with very bright colours. Now, when we talk about cherubs as well, this is an important thing that many people won't know. I found it years ago, and a little bit of a personal revelation here. At this particular time, my children were actually quite gifted and quite psychic. They were fully open. They hadn't closed their gifts down, whereas they have closed them down to a level now because that's life. Okay, so where I'm going with this is the cherubim have got 4 faces. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, what a load of cods, okay, because I always am skeptical. But I was also very aware at the time that my daughter, although I hadn't seen her guardian angel, I was aware that she used to describe her guardian angel as being very small and sitting on her shoulder. Now, I need to be clear here. I never ever put descriptors into my children's vocabulary. I let them explain to me what it was that they saw. And interestingly, what I find funny, even to this day, is I would say, these people that say I've got an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, for my daughter, that actually probably was quite a fair description, actually, because she could be so absolutely sweet, but then almost like a Gemini, her head could spin and she could be really quite unpleasant at different times. This is as a child, okay? I'm talking about when she was a child. She would challenge me to the nth degree, and I used to make jokes. Actually, I have to put a clarification in here. I used to make jokes about her when she was little, when I was talking to my friends, that because she also had blonde and curly hair, that she was like the child in the poem that says, I think it goes, I had a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very, very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid. Okay, this is like what my daughter was. However, I am diverting a bit. Where I'm going with this is, I asked her when she was, I don't know, probably about 12, in the awareness that she had a cherub guardian angel or a guardian angel of the cherubim order, I asked her if she could take a look at her guardian angel. And this is without me having given her this information. And, I just said to her, actually, can you see it, as if it was presenting to you as a human being? And she said, yes, I can. And I said, well, I want you to take a look at her face. I said, and tell me, how many faces has she got? And my daughter turned around and she said to me, well, that's interesting. She said, I never noticed that before. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, she's got more than one face. And I because I'd read where the four faces are, I said to her, okay, so describe them. How do you see these faces? And she described them to me perfectly. And the other thing is, so she could see three with ease, but her actual angel turned around to show her where the fourth face was. That might be, if you're interested in knowing a little bit more about that, that's something I can probably address on the yarning. But anyway, I'm just telling you, this is my information and experience and understanding of what it all means. And whether they are seraphim or cherubim, they're tasked basically as an angelic order to assist with empowering a person and to help them free themselves from holding any form of guilt about being a powerful person. Because quite often a lot of people go through life being a bit of a victim because they're too scared to step up to the plate and be a leader and to be a powerful leader as well. So this is about encouraging them to embrace their own personal power. So what might be new to you, you might not be aware of this, and this certainly is one of the lessons or wisdom that Ariel imparts to us, is that angels and angelic beings or light beings, and we'll talk more about them, have an ascension pathway that's similar to the humans, and humans and angels do complement each other to a large extent. This angelic essence is basically, it's very expansive, and it is naturally attuned to the cosmos, and it carries this desire to seek knowledge and awareness of all form. So this atomic essence, which is the essence of the creator, is found in all minerals, plants, animals, and humans. And the form is not limited to physical existence. It seeks a constant expansion beyond the limitations of physicality, shall we say. So the angelic awareness is one that holds this pattern, or what some people refer to as the blueprint or divine plan, divine map for perfection. And this atomic matter is made manifest into shape and form. So this might get a little bit confusing. You might have to replay it, but I will give you an example. So basically there's an atomic angelic essence. There's the energy that has a, if we were talking about physical, it has a cellular structure. We call it an atomic matter, and that matter is able to be pulled together to manifest into a physical or other type energy structure. I suppose if we were talking about this simply and doing a comparison to human life, it would be that, you don't get a cake unless you pull the ingredients together. You've got to put the flour, the milk, the eggs, and all of this kind of stuff. You bring it all together and then you make something that's absolutely wonderful. But anyway, in regard to the angels, an example would include that there are devas of a shrub or tree that know exactly how this plant's going to mature and blossom, and they will support the growth and the changes in the same way that as humans we have guardian angels that support our perfect development and our manifestation as aligned with our divine purpose or plan. So this is the same for any shrub or flower that you look at out there. There's a whole heap of angelic forms, because they've got different names. We're going to talk about them shortly. But Ariel oversees this, the doing, right? The atomic aspect is the doing part. Oh goodness me, it's very difficult to put some of these things into words. I've summarized it here, and hopefully this makes sense. So within this context, the angelic essence is the being aspect. It is the part that is, we are what we are. And while our physical atomic aspect is the doing part, our body in the shrub does what it needs to do to expand upon itself and reach maturity. So hopefully that makes sense. The angelic essence is we're going to grow either way, grow or shrink, depending on how much essence we've got there. But if we want to thrive, then this is where the other light forms become helpful and supports. I hope I've explained that well. We can rehash this in the yarning. So when it comes to the next bit of information, I will just outline clearly here. This is what I believe. I can't necessarily categorically state this with any great factual reliability either, and I don't think there's any evidence anywhere to actually support this. So I think we'll all find it easier to accept and understand that while humans go through many lifetimes of birth and rebirth before we reach that state of soul consciousness, where we don't need to be born again, as in have another life on the earth plane or whatever, that bit most people easily understand, or more easily. However, nature spirits will also go through a series of evolutions until they become transformed to being angels or the angelhood, and then they would actually be working underneath the guidance of Ariel. So when we talk about these little nature spirits, they can start off very, very small. It's believed, this is the bit where I say I've got no categoric proof for this, but I do believe it's not outside the realm of possibility that they go through about 124 major initiations upon their journey of life, starting initially as tiny little fairy-like sparks of light, if you like, in children's books with no individual awareness, and where they actually just act purely upon their intuition and guidance, which is given to them by the more advanced spirits. They steer and guide these nature spirits through their development, and then as they advance and develop their own higher consciousness through the process of life, death and rebirth, they start to develop their own will of connecting to the eternal or the creator. So it's easy to understand that while they're going through these development stages, because all of their consciousness is directed towards creation and creator love, that these are very selfless energy forms, shall we say, without a personal or individual agenda. Their motives for movement and action is beyond question. They tend to be joyous. The nature devas are very joyous, and they do project their vitality and electric energy to all people that are open to receive. So okay, I can say yes, that's been my experience, because I've spent a lot of time trying to connect with them outdoors. I actually love the nature energies, shall we say, but I don't want to spend too long talking about this. When they're completing their tasks, they use creative intelligence, rhythmic breathing is part of it, and spirit. And there are devas that are attached to every single form, shall we say, every blade of grass, every flower petal. And when we attune to the nature angels, we're actually entering this doorway to a world of godlike beings. It's absolutely beautiful when we do get this connection happening. Now, within the context of the fact that the angel forms and the Devas have this ongoing series of evolution, without me going into it to the extent that I did on the previous slide, it stands to reason and logically, and I believe this anyway, whether or not I'd been introduced to the angel of nature or not, but all of the birds and animals also come to Earth as part of their own soul development. They also have a divine plan, and I realise that some people are going to struggle to agree with this, especially if they're non-meat eaters. However, based on the principles of soul growth, evolution, and divine plan, and having faith in the process of the universe, an animal or any life force on the planet is born or created in the knowledge that it serves a higher purpose. So in the past, when an animal's life was taken, and I want to reiterate this here, because the non-meat eaters, fanatical ones I'm talking about, will try and guilt people into not eating meat. But the point is that if we respect the fact that each animal that is dispatched for the sake of feeding humans, they've made a choice before they came down here. For me, the way I look at it, it is not that we eat meat, it is how that we acknowledge and respect the life of the animal that we're consuming, whether it's a fish, a prawn, a crab, or one of the larger animals, whether it's a chicken or a turkey or whatever. Because part of this grand design and perfect design is that we are all part of the food chain, and that includes human beings. We're not above being on the menu for other animal species as well. And I suspect that when it comes to the mass production of animals such as farming and salmon farming and all the rest of it, there are problems with that from a planetary perspective, but not necessarily because we humans are eating meat. It's how we're treating the animals and how we treat the environment. So if I remind you all that historically, before we became a consumerist world, whenever an animal was dispatched, whether it was your goose or your duck or even a cow or a sheep, every element of the animal was used and the animals were dispatched in a kindly way. Now, perhaps my attitude towards this is because of my interactions with Aboriginal people, both here in Australia and in overseas. And I understand that when they took an animal's life, obviously there was ceremony attached to it, ceremonies of gratitude, and that every single part, from the bones to the meat to the fur, the skin, and all the rest of it, became part of another object, shall you say. I mean, look, even back in the day when the Aboriginal folk hunted crocodile, they ate the crocodile. Crocodile used to be turned into leather. Now, if you speak to the Aboriginal people here, we've just disrupted, sorry, I'm struggling with my words, we've disrupted the natural rhythm, because it is now no longer legal to hunt crocodiles, and so their numbers are growing. And because there's no other predator to the crocodile, and we have really big ones over here, than humans, so we have to do what is then called culling. They have to do legitimate culling to bring the numbers back, because they obviously are a threat to human life. And to me, my way of thinking, which I think I'd like to believe is aligned with the Creator, is when you're culling, you're killing without any good purpose except to protect humans. Whereas if you were to take the animal's life and use it as a meal or turn it into product like shoes or whatever, which is biodegradable, or a handbag or whatever, these things are going to go back down into the earth eventually, better than plastics and synthetics. So either way, this all becomes a big question for later on. I'm just making the point that we're all part of a food chain. It's not the use that is the problem, it's the overuse, it's the lack of gratitude, it's the abuse of the generosity and abundance of nature, with a lack of respect for all animals. But they also evolve. So I just want to make this clear. They also have their own spiritual evolution as well. So we have fire divas, and they tend to be more active during the sunrise and sunset. And the way they work is by bathing our etheric body with sun rays, basically, to renew and activate our life force. Now, after the midday sun, you might also receive a really powerful internal clearing and cleansing of your astral body, which is actually, I think, interesting. If you look at people with a PTSD diagnosis, or the aged, shall we say, as we age too, this is part of it. They quite often enjoy that afternoon nap of recalibration. At sunset, of course, they're very active again. They send out multitude of sun rays, for this sunset full of colours, so that you can take a moment and receive blessings. And from my experience of observing sunsets, it's also to appreciate them and to feel a space of gratitude to the Creator. Now, most people would turn around and say, oh, well, I do thank my lucky stars or whatever at sunset when I'm particularly privileged to see, that we have some amazing sunsets here in Australia. But do we always remember within that space of thanking the Creator to actually acknowledge the fire divas, that personal thank you very much to the fire divas. They're also known as salamanders, by the way. Now, from a human perspective, I just want to mention that many people fear fire, and many people also with this little fire diva here, they might think she looks a bit scary or whatever. But we in Australia, we actually know that fire is a necessary component of renewal, not just of ourselves as human beings. I mean, if we were talking about the sunlight aspect, we know that the physical aspect of fire is very necessary to our environment, because some of our plants can't propagate unless they have experienced this extreme heat of a bushfire, because that opens the pods up. They need the fires to open the pods up so the seeds can be released. And other times the fire clears away the underbrush to make the space for new growth. So it speeds up the process of decomposition of plant matter, and it allows for these minerals to return back to the earth for use by Mother Nature. So you'll be starting to see, I hope, here that there is, when we talk about a natural order, there's a purpose to all things. And when we talk about the lessons or the core messages of the angel of nature, I think for me, like, I just got a wave of it as I was talking to you. It's when you recognize the beauty and the cycle. I mean, even with the fire angels and this business of the earth having to have a bushfire to help renew the earth, it's like, my God, it's just so amazing the way this works. When people say things happen by accident, really, I don't think so. It's just amazing. So it becomes awe-inspiring. The process of nature just leaves us awestruck, I believe. So the Earth Divas are actually the most, well, I think probably the easiest to connect with for us as humans, especially if we're living in the urban city areas. So even if you don't live on a large block of land or you don't have a big garden, you'll probably have access to at least a plant or two, or to an open space or park nearby. And when we are sitting in the garden, there is this power of generation and regeneration that we get from these Earth Divas. So they're certainly beneficial for those of us that are trying to grow crops, if we're trying to grow fruit and vegetables or whatever. And if we've got our own little garden happening, certainly to flower, and even if we've got, like I've got orange trees and lemon trees here, even to help our trees to bear fruit. So seeds, of course, germinate in the topsoil. Humans can draw upon the Kundalini energy of the base chakra to regenerate our own bodies. And basically, we harness and direct the energy toward positive outcomes. Well, the thing is that we can actually draw upon this Kundalini as passion and also direct it or send it to the Earth Divas so that they can use it as part of performing their tasks. So we can work and interact with the Earth Divas or call upon them to assist us and guide us. But we'll talk about that in a little while. So when we talk about Earth Divas, they've got different names because, of course, as with all of us, different purposes. I first learned about earth elementals when I was living in a mining town, and I want to mention these specifically because, from my understanding, they're not actually a little winged diva or sprite. I first heard about them in Kalgoorlie, and if you know anything about this particular area in Australia, it's a very big mining region. It's a gold mining area, but I think there's I can't remember all the details of the mine sites now, but there's a lot of underground mining, and where people go down what they call down the hole. They have to go into the hole, do the mining. And what was happening was, I'm aware of this, you might not be, when they go down the hole and they're taking out the earth, there's usually water bodies, underground water bodies there. And historically, the old boys that were involved in mining, they reckon they could hear the earth talk. And that would be, they used that description because if there was a water body behind a wall, the noises underground would make rumbles. So they would know that there was going to be a break of the wall, usually before it happened. And I'm not sure if I'm drawing a picture here, but basically the guys could be working. If they didn't get out the hole, it would be like popping a balloon, and the groundwater would just pour into their little tunnels, and that would be the end of them. Anyway, in the old days, of course, it didn't happen quite as often because the guys would listen to the noises of the earth. But in modern days, machinery and all of this kind of thing is they can't hear the noises of the earth when they've got their machines going. And there was a number of accidents in the region where people were killed while they were at work through this underground flooding. So this is where I learned about energy and Reiki on a conscious level, and I had a Reiki teacher, and he was the first person to talk to me because I had concerns. I had family members that used to go down the hole, and he was the one to say to me, there's such a thing as earth elementals. They are very sympathetic to human needs, especially because we have to work, and they understand and respect that this includes mining, because we all have to live and survive. And what he put to me is that while mining is disruptive, it can be very helpful for people when they go down the hole, or the pit as we also call it, that they basically give a nod of respect to the elementals as they go through, where they thank you very much, please keep me safe today. And then when they leave the hole at the end of the day, thank you very much for keeping me safe today and for giving me an opportunity to work and survive and support my family. So anyway, where I'm going with this is that in the knowledge of this, I thought, well, I take on board stuff like this in as far as I'm not convinced whether or not it's true, but I'm willing to give it a try. So what I suggested to my family members, because in particular there was a gentleman that I absolutely loved, I was passionately in love with him, and he was the one that I was worried about because there'd been breaches down the hole that he was going into. So either way, shall we say, the whole time he was working there and going down the hole, there was no flooding. But when he left that mine site and went overseas, within a couple of months of him leaving, there was an underground flood. And if I recall correctly, I believe 3 lives were lost on the day of that particular flood. So to me, that could be coincidence, or it could be the earth elements working with at least one person to keep people safe. I'll leave it for you to think about and contemplate. Before I move on to the next slide, I just want to acknowledge actually that it's not just my Reiki teacher that's talked to me about earth elementals. I've got a lot of stories about them through my conversations with the Australian Aboriginal folk. But once again, I'll leave that for a different day. So part of the elemental group as well is called the Keepers of the Crystals. The Keepers of the Crystals, they're a different kind of earth elemental, and apparently every crystal that we have has one of them. This is obviously something I believe, so call me out with the fairies, I'm okay about that. I don't believe that the Keepers of the Crystals have wings. I think they're more of the elemental variety that's wingless. But basically, you might, if you went into one of these crystal caves, they're probably everywhere, and the little nature spirits and all the rest of it. However, they certainly are associated with the crystal. Now, I will hold a separate video over the Keepers of the Crystals in the near future, but I do believe that as much as we love crystals, we actually should apply moderation. It's really difficult not to, because they're so beautiful and we love them. But at the end of the day, they take many years to build. And all I can say is we as humans. For me, I'll go into a shop historically and it was like having a child in a lolly shop. And in fact, actually, I used to lay them out my house so that the children could help themselves. They used to come over, the little kids in the neighbourhood, and take the tumbles off the tops of furniture and walk out with their pockets rattling. But I figured children took what they needed, not what. Another story for another day. Moving on. So we've got a bit to get through, so I'll try and speed it up a little bit. Okay, water divas, they circulate water through the earth in the same way that blood flows through human veins. The blood fulfills the purpose, or the body's purposes and needs, and it also carries necessary and vital elements for health. And the blood also helps to purify the body and remove toxicity or, waste, basically. So if we apply this to the way the angels of water work, or the water divas, the water is shifted through the earth to help rehydrate arid areas such as deserts. And if there is too much water, such as floods, they can be called upon to stop rain even. Or even to generate rain. I'm sure that you've actually heard of the rain dances and that kind of thing. They're able also, within their power, they can direct the currents of water and do what they can to keep our water clean and pure. Now, this is not an easy task, let's be real, because sometimes we as humans, we will interrupt the natural order of flow, and this can be by building dams or I just need a cough. So building of dams, in many instances that's fine, but other times it can result in stagnant waste pools. The other thing to remember too, I remember here an Aboriginal person told me, it wasn't something that we were taught at school. We were taught that there was a guy, C.Y. O'Connor. We know this. He built the means to get water for about 400, 500 k's away from the coastline into the little town Kalgoorlie, which is a desert region, and it was quite a miracle back in its day. But what I didn't know was that as part of being able to deliver this water to these areas, he actually blasted out a natural water hole, culvert, I'm not quite sure what you call it, but either way it was sacred land to the Aboriginal folk. And the reason it was sacred was because it was very much on the edge of fresh water and salt water. And so when this earth body, if you like, was blasted, it meant that the sacred and fresh water was lost. Okay, so in a place like Australia, we need to look after our water pools. Other issues that occur is when we build in the wrong areas, like housing. And so this is one of the reasons why we get the levels of flooding here in Australia. I can't speak about other countries, but, there are many of us that are sort of scratch our head and go, well, why are they building houses on what is natural floodplains? You just wouldn't do that. High tide, you're going to wipe everything out doing high rains, but whatever. Back to water divas. So the idea is to contemplate and think about the water that is in our waterways, whether they're naturally forming lakes, ponds and streams, or if they're the oceans and dams, if they're fountains, that are man-made, or if they're naturally occurring spas. There is a connection between the purity of water and the health of our blood, so we need to ensure that we keep the water pure and clean. And of course, this is where we interact again with nature. The tiny water divas, these are invisible to the naked eye. They also enter our body when we drink water, and they assist in the process of purifying our blood, the blood of our body. So they assist with our own physical health as well. Now, we can strengthen our connection with these divas simply by turning around and saying thank you, acknowledging them for their contributions. Now, this is one of those times when I say, it doesn't matter if you believe or you don't believe. The point is, give consideration to it, have a think about it. Maybe I'm right, maybe the information I'm giving you is wrong, but what harm is it going to do if you actually adopt this process of gratitude into your life for blessings seen and unseen? So anyway, moving on, there's other divas that work as well with us, and this is the air divas. I had to take a bit of a break in between slides, so I apologise if there's any difference with the audio, but I'm going to crack on now and get back into Air Divas. And as I say, I'll try and move quickly because this is becoming a very long video, which I always knew it would, by the way, because there's a lot to cover. So, okay, when we talk about the Air Divas, we're talking about those angelic sprite type thingies, nymphs, if you want to refer to them as that. They work with the air. Now, of course, the air is associated with the oceans and the trees as part of oxygenating the environment and purifying the air, of which we, of course, inhale. So this is another way that the air divas work with us, or the angelic realms work with us in our physical health and well-being. So they're responsible for directing the cooling breezes that we get on hot days, as well as shifting and blowing rain, clouds to where it's needed to go. They work with the angels of water as part of regenerating the land and purifying the waterways and nourishing vegetation. Now, of course, if you think about that, that's rational because water contains oxygen. That's why it's H2O. It's got oxygen in it. It works with air. They will move from plant to plant, treetop to treetop, and flower to flower, much like we see the insects in the garden, including the bees. What else can I add? Just simply, I think that they do work with the divas of water also when there's a need for evaporation and for the release of water, or for things like snow and frost and, other combinations of these elements. Elephants would be good. Also, the divas of lightning, they will attend when the lower astral plane has become really heavy with impurities. And in those instances, the angels of electricity, you may as well say, draw in the force of not draw in, but basically they're drawn to attend through the force of attraction and magnetism. So one thing I believe it's very important to tell people is that natural disasters, they are not something that is created by the angels or the angelic workers, if you like, the angelic workers of nature. They are a direct response to energy and to the mood of an area. And if there is turbulence in a region, it is basically a force of nature. It's a force of attraction, such as, typhoons, earthquakes, hurricanes, and floods. They'll gravitate to regions where there is a low vibration. We can call that a low mood, but we can also say that moods that are low vibration are things such as hatred, selfishness, deceit, prejudice, and greed. These are the best anchors of really low vibration energies. And this is where the forces of nature come in as clearing, cleansing, and purifying. Now, I need to be clear, it's not restricted and limited to that. It doesn't mean that all those people, because I'm sure that there's going to be people listening to this, if they haven't been directly affected by a natural disaster, they may know people or they may have lost family members through natural disasters. It doesn't mean that those people were low vibration. It means that sometimes good people become caught in bad situations. Now, from my perspective, this is my interpretation, and you might disagree, so this is an option or an opportunity for you to put your viewpoints up. I believe that when we're attuned to the elements of nature, or certainly, if not to the elements of nature, to our own guidance, then we become aware, or if we're following our guidance, we're able to shift ourselves out of the way of the disaster to safety. Now, I think the problems come in, there's a couple of reasons why humans are affected by these natural disasters. And one is that we're not paying attention to the elements ourselves. We're not looking at the weather patterns or what's going on around us, or we're so busy or so caught up in the process of living and surviving that we feel, even if our inner guidance, that compass is saying, go to the hills, get out the way, we go, I can't, I'm busy, I've got to go to work, I've got to do X and Y. And so we don't do it. And then we become stuck within these unpleasant circumstances, shall we say. So I'm speaking quickly, of course, to try and get through this. So the points I'm trying to make here is that the world will give us warnings when stuff is about to happen. And by that, I'm referring to things like earthquakes and volcanoes. They usually are preempted by smaller tremors before they actually get to the big one. Not always the case, I know. But the other thing is too, with cyclones, I'm just going to tell you a little story here, because I grew up in an area where cyclones were an annual event, and sometimes you would get cyclones a couple of times a year. For those people that don't know what a cyclone is, it's like a lower form of a hurricane. I believe hurricanes are much stronger, but cyclones can get up to over 200 mile an hour or whatever it was back in the day. And I have a certain amount of concern, shall we say. Alarm bells go off when a cyclone's coming. But the thing was, there was never a disaster that impacted on the communities that I was living in a way that we might see here. We would have this, but there would be no loss of life. And I had expressed to somebody that I had a certain amount of fear. This is during my early adulthood, of being trapped outdoors in a cyclone. And he said to me, all you've got to do, because of course, culturally, my white folk, didn't pay attention to the weather patterns, shall we say, and their own inner guidance. We're going back about 30, 40 years here. And he said to me, just watch the local Indigenous. He said, that's all you've got to do. He said, something's up. He said, when they leave town and they go off up into the hills, he said, they'll go and sit it out in the caves until the risk is past. Now, that was quite true for many years. I'm not sure that it is now. And I think another concern too is when it comes to things like flooding, is how we are building our towns these days. Certainly in Australia, what they do is they're building houses on floodplains. Now, back in the day, goodness gracious, Queensland is notorious. That's a place in Australia, particularly the outback, for what we call flash floods. And back in the day, the old timers, they would live in these areas, but they knew the floods were coming, or that they were present and real risk and that they could happen at any time. And what they did was they built their houses up on stilts so that when the floodwaters came in, they would be safe from them. And so I sort of think, it's a bit like whatever environment you're living in, you've got to build to the environment. But what we've had happen here in Australia is that I know certain townships where we just scratch and the floods have come in and wiped out newly developed areas. And it's like, why did you build in a floodplain? We know they're floodplains. And as I said before, we as humans tend to try and alter the landscape, but we don't take into account the forces of nature. And I might just leave it as that. I just want to remind people, though, that during a natural disaster, such as the 2004 tsunami, there was one guy I recall being on the news, and he identified as a Christian. And I will never, ever forget seeing him, because they showed the area. He was watching the tsunami come towards them, and he was running a daycare centre at the time. I can't remember what country it was in, but it did show on the news how he had stood. He explained that he did a face-off to the wave, and he did the in God's name, Jesus Christ, whatever, held his crucifix up, expecting to be wiped out, but basically calling for the protection of himself and the children. But I think the children was his priority, to be honest. And he said as he stood there, he watched the waves split and actually go around the building, which I found to be very interesting. Now, of course, we've seen this. I saw this on the TV, so I don't doubt him, because you could see where the buildings around the daycare centre had actually been wiped out by this tsunami. But the daycare centre itself and the garden and the boat that was in the garden, that was all left safe. Interesting. I should have pointed out too on the previous slide that when it comes to the really big natural disasters, my information or understanding is that even the smaller type sprites or nature elements, devas, that kind of thing, they will get themselves out the way when a natural disaster is coming through. But of course, my understanding is too that those that are stronger will actually stay within that area and try and use their energy to minimise any damage, shall we say. So moving on to the next part of the way that we can acknowledge and show our appreciation of the angels of nature and the elementals is by raising our own personal vibration. And that includes detoxifying and purifying our own selves, our bodies, our thoughts and our behaviours. as well as our environment. And this helps to keep the energy of an area high, and it will go some way to minimizing the impacts of any natural disasters, or what we could call disasters, but are basically, from a cosmic force perspective, a purification event. So we could consider that this is much like regular household maintenance. The longer we leave the household chores, like the dusting, the more the debris builds up until it takes a lot more effort to cleanse and needs this major overhaul to get things pristine again. You will notice this even with bushfires. After a bushfire, after it's been through, I mean, it's black and it's awful. We see this here in Australia quite regularly. But once the bushfire has passed and nature starts to regenerate itself, it just comes through really pristine and beautiful. So this is what happens after all natural disasters. It does eventually turn around and become lovely again. So the physical things we can do besides transforming ourselves is actually to be aware of our own impact on nature and our own environmental footprint. So we're not just talking here about recycling of our waste or whatever, or minimizing the driving journeys that we go, or transport and this kind of thing, or even the use of toxic chemicals. I mean, that's all part of it. But other things to take in consideration is things such as our clothing choices. Do you wear natural fibres or are you wearing synthetics? Are your material choices around budget, or does your budget allow for you to take a sustainability approach? Before we use synthetic clothing, for example, all of our clothes were made from natural fibres, which of course is far better for the earth because it's biodegradable. Here in Australia, though, it's actually very expensive to buy any of the natural fibre products. And I have heard people from overseas saying that they just cannot believe the costs of clothing over here. Especially if they have historically bought things like the linen and the cotton and wool type products. Those over here are just going to cost you a fortune. So there's some very simple activities that we can do to strengthen our connection to nature, even if we can't get outside. If you do things like have a bath or a soak in the tub, or if you use salts, herbs, essential oils, and this can be salts for cooking even, right? These are all the bounty of nature. If you use hot springs and all of this kind of thing, they're nature's gifts. Even the oceans. I mean, obviously, if you can get outside, I feel that's the best place to connect with nature, but we're not restricted to that. The other thing that we can do is put flowers in our home. If you've got a garden, grow some flowers, take a cutting. Now, a tip for you that I do when I use the flowers is that when I'm actually, what is the word? It's not trimming a flower or pruning a flower, picking flowers with my secateurs, shall we say, with the little scissors, the garden scissors. Whenever I pick flowers, I always thank the plant and the angel energy for the beautiful flower. I've got roses in my garden, so, I particularly like that. So it's acknowledging and respecting their contributions to our lives. And yeah, I'm not going to go too far into that business of picking the flowers. I've got a whole thought process with that. But the other thing that we can do is when you go for walks, particularly in open spaces and parks, have your heart open and notice and recognize the Creator in all the things around us, because this is the miracle of creation. Once you understand the activity and all that's involved to maintain the beautiful plants and this environment, it becomes this miracle. You notice the miracle. You notice the essence of the Creator and divinity within all things. So the idea is that you allow your energy to merge with the essence of creation. Now, another way of doing this, and I haven't done it for a while because actually I don't have the quite the same environment when I used to do it. Many years ago, when I was living in a community where it was possible, I used to spend my evenings, not all of them, but often enough, lying on my front lawn on a beach towel, if you don't mind, in the middle of the desert on my little small section of lawn that I had. And I would spend time looking at the earth and the stars, and didn't matter what phase the moon was in. Sometimes in winter, I actually would do the same thing. You could invite the sacred breath to flow through you and renew and recharge your sense of vitality when you're doing these kind of activities. Another way, and you will know this if you've ever had the opportunity to do it, it's kind of fabulous actually. And I don't know if everybody has this as an option to them, but sitting around a fire, a campfire, and especially at nighttime is just incredibly cleansing and relaxing and peaceful. I think this is why people like to have an open fire in their home where possible, because it just creates this sense of relaxation and peace. As an afterthought on the previous slide as well, when we talk about the fires and campfires and things like that, and people liking to burn wood in their homes, I just want to remind people that if you're going to do this kind of thing, especially if you're out bush, please do not take the green wood for a couple of reasons. Make sure you use fallen wood, but when you use the wood for bushfire, remember a couple of things, and that is that it provides habitat to the native species that are there, and you would never burn a hollow log. Okay, so hollow logs can be homes for hibernating species, such as protected species like the bobtail that we've got over here. And I recall finding out about this the hard way. We had been out to a property, and the guy that had the property, I think you would call it a ranch, and if people in the US, it would be a ranch. Over here, it's a station. I'd been out to the station, and they had asked me if I wanted some firewood before I left, and which was very kind of them. They actually loaded my car up. And unbeknownst to me, it wasn't until I got home that I found out, probably about a week later actually, that one of the logs was hollow and it had a bobtail lizard in it. And my son, being a young child, he'd found it and he was actually hibernating it in his bedroom under the bed and wondering why it wasn't eating the apples it was giving it. It was because it was too tired and having a sleep. But either way, the problem with that is that while I had become aware of this and clearly saved the little lizard's life, it needed to be relocated. So I did call up Conservation and Land Management, and what I found is that you actually have to put them back in the area that you found them, which I didn't know where the log had come from, because they're actually territorial. So we can actually interfere with habitat just by accident. And so we have a responsibility to care not only for the environment, but also the native life that's upon it. So anyway, moving on, another thing that we can do to strengthen connection and work with the angels is, as I said, go into the open space, be it the garden or a park or even a remote location like a forest, or if we're in Australia, it's a bush. When you're out there, do your sacred breath. Okay, do the breathing, state your intention to be open to receive direction from the nature angels, and not only to be open to receiving the direction, but open to acting upon the advice. Now, this can be the pruning, the planting, the watering, and cleaning up if you've got flowers in your garden and it's flowers you want to see. And during the process of this, you would state your intention of how you want to be able to interact with the angels. So if you're wanting to grow fruit and vegetables, just communicate it over. Here in Australia, we have a popular vine-like flower that is a wild jasmine. I think it's got a perfume. If you're wanting to have a perfumed garden, the angels will work with you, or the little angel sprites, the earth devas and the air devas, they'll work with the blueprint of the plant to allow this divine idea of your garden to manifest. So basically the advice is, yes, as you work in your garden at any time, allow yourself to feel and acknowledge their energy and their contributions, and send love to them and appreciation and gratitude. And when you do this, the more you do it, the stronger and the better results. Now, the other thing that a person can do, I have to admit, I don't do it. I'm not perfect. I like a lot of this stuff. This is why I say it's important to act upon your guidance. I'm human, so sometimes I think of good things and then I don't follow through. But where I'm going with this is, you can offer gratitude boxes and stuff like that as part of connecting to nature. And this can be, when I was in Bali, they just would burn incense in the garden, or they might put out I don't know, a little bit of food or something like that. I guess if I was going to do it here in Australia and I wanted to attract bees to my garden or whatever, I might put a bit of honey or something like that out there. Use your own direction and guidance would be where I'm going with this. But it's about actively cooperating with the elements to get this peaceful type connection between worlds, between their world and our world, because we work together. So basically, to attune to the nature angels, you've got to have a really genuine, loving interest in the planet and in them. And you would be encouraged to practice showing the appreciation for the life within the soil, the shrubs, the flowers, trees, rocks, breeze, mountains, seas, oceans, lakes, rivers, and streams, whatever you can think of. And you will be able to open the door to acceptance by these devas. I would encourage you, as I guess the angel of nature Ariel does, is to take every opportunity that you can to send love and appreciation to the devas and to the angels. And every single time you go outside, silently make a prayer of gratitude, particularly at morning and at dusk. And to tend to your garden, if you haven't got one, maybe start growing a few in pots, to tend to them lovingly, and to also show your appreciation and respect for rocks and crystals and the earth. Make them your friend. I'm trying to wind this up because it's become so very long. Instead of me going through all of this, these are suggestions that you can do through the invocation of Ariel. Now, the thing is, too, you might be asking yourself, well, how does this relate to me being able to find the truth of my true nature? Well, the bottom line is that our true nature is actually peaceful, it's loving, it's caring, it's compassionate, it is divine and beautiful. And that is the truth of every single one of us. The problem is that we get a little bit lost sometimes. Now, to put this into perspective, as I said before, I'm human. I don't always do what I aim to do or what I think that I should be doing, and that includes putting the gratitude boxes out. But what I can say is sometimes throughout my day, I might experience a little bit of disturbance or being unsettled, shall we say. So earlier today, in between, when I had to take a break in between doing this, I kind of lost my pathway a little bit, and I felt a bit of agitation because this was when I had to take the break in my slides. And I went outside and I sat down, and I was initially agitated. But when I'm sitting outside, and I guess you will probably become this way as well, I'm sitting there and I might be caught up in whatever it is that's bothering me, which is outside of my true nature, because it creates a little bit of anxiety or discomfort or something, an emotional state that is less than love, shall we say. So while I'm sitting outside in nature, I see, if you don't mind, actually, it's a beautiful parrot has flown into the garden today. And within that moment, I see the beauty of the parrot. I see the beauty of nature, the trees, the colour of the leaves and everything else. And I see the miracle of life. And as I see that, I start to feel more appreciative. I shift from this state of emotional unrest back into my peaceful, truthful state of who I am. And this is how we find our true nature and how we manage to expand our vibration, lift our vibration, raise ourselves, and to create this connection with the divine on a more personal level is through the state of peace and love. So this is what we can do by connecting with Ariel and the elements, if you like, and the devas, is raise our vibration so that we can experience more and more divine love and be aligned with the truth of who we are, and to be able to walk our path in our integrity. So this video has got so very long. I'm sorry it's taken so long, but there's a lot of stuff that I could have talked about for ages on, because actually I love nature. I love what it offers us. And I hope today that I've been able to give you some really useful information, because as I've been doing this video, I've actually reminded myself through the process of delivery, which is the recording of the audio, but also through the preparation, that the biggest blessing, when we talk about Ariel showing us the truth of who we are, I would actually say that it's far more than that. Nature just reflects life in general as well. It offers us so much opportunity for learning and understanding and knowing how life works. And I just couldn't even begin to do justice to to be able to express how I feel about the lessons of nature and the lessons of the elements and the lessons of Ariel. And I think this is because I actually feel quite deeply connected to what is called the fairy realm. So this is, people think fairies, they think Tinkerbell, but actually, when we're talking about fairies, we're talking about the earth sprites, we're talking about the elementals here. And I've been working also with this earth energy for many, many years as well. And it's just incredible. Once you start that pathway, it's a journey, and it's a journey of great beauty and love. So for now, I'm just going to say, if you've hung in here for this long, thank you so much for being part of my journey. If you would like to leave a comment, please do. If you've had experiences yourself, please do mention them, because I'm all ears. It will be wonderful when I can actually do lives, if we can do interactive and talk about some of the most amazing and incredible experiences that we've had. I look forward to that. But for now, though, my friends, I'm going to say love you, leave you, have a wonderful day, take care, and I'll catch you on the next video. Bye bye for now.